Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Data Playbook. Here we're going through the Week 10 Sunday games, so let's get into the next preview. For this afternoon game, we have Detroit at Washington, where Detroit's favored on the money line with a spread of 8.5 and a total line of 49.5. I'll switch over to the averages and then look at the rankings. Starting off with Detroit, you have a scoring rank of 2, so they're second best in the league at scoring for themselves. With everything else is about average. Their rushing rank's top third. Allowed rushing rank's pretty good. Tight end rank's pretty good. For Washington, though, everything else is probably about the opposite, about bottom third or less, maybe about average, but allowed passing rank at 30 is really bad. I guess the one thing that they do have going for them is that they do have a rushing rank of 4. And your quarterbacks in this game are Jared Goff and Marcus Mariota, with Jared Goff having 17.1 fantasy points per game and Mariota having an average of 12.9 fantasy points per game. Jared Goff has 3 interceptions this season, with 2 fumbles lost to a sack, for a total of 5 turnovers. Marcus Mariota has 4 interceptions this season, with 1 rushing fumble, for a total of 5 turnovers. Moving over to their averages, and then looking how much they affect the rushing game. As we know with Goff, it's very little. Once in a while, he can get it running, so he gets maybe about 5% of the team's total carries. Over here with Mariota, he gets also very little. A little bit more, though, with 4.5 average carries per game. That gives him about maybe 5 or 6, maybe even 7% of the team's total carries. Next up, we have the running backs with Jamar Gibbs and Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt. With Gibbs, you have 18.2 average fantasy points per game, and Ja'Cory averages 8.7. The only turnovers come from Merritt with 2 fumbles, so then we'll look in the averages. And then here with Detroit, it's interesting where you have Gibbs as the number 1 starting back, but he only gets about 53% of the team's total carries, and there's about that 5% from Jared Goff, and the rest comes from Montgomery. So with that reason, we have Montgomery at 41.8% of the team's total carries. I feel like it's worth bringing up his page to look at real fast, where he averages 11.9 fantasy points per game and has had 1 turnover. And then there's his season averages, if you need them as well. But now looking over here at Merritt, he gets 38.2% of the team's total carries. Once again, he came in as a backup because some people got hurt with Eckler out and everything. So there's been some juggling around of who's been the back, and he finally landed there. You also see with like Jaden Daniels being out hurt, who definitely had some carries in here. So you see a lot more share as they've had to rotate people around. And then getting into our number 1 receivers, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Deebo Samuel, since Terry McLaurin is still listed as out. Amon-Ra averages 20.7 fantasy points per game, and Deebo has averaged 13.5. Neither of them have given up a turnover this season, so we'll look in their averages. And then with their receiving share, you have Amon-Ra getting about 33.1% of the team's total receiving share. That is the largest of anybody else on the team. Deebo Samuel gets 20.1% of the team's total receiving share, which is also the largest of anybody on the team. For your number 2 receivers, you have Jameson Williams and Jalen Lane. Jameson Williams averaging 9.3 fantasy points per game, while Jalen Lane's averaging 4.2. With no turnovers, we'll go straight to the averages. And with Williams, you get 18.5% of the team's total receiving share. That puts him about 3rd, it looks like. So we'll see if this is Laporta or not. And then over here with Jalen Lane, you get almost 4% of the team's total receiving share. That is fairly small, but he is about 3rd in line. And they've had to fill in a lot of different people this year. And then with the tight ends, you have Sam Laporta and Zach Ertz. Sam Laporta averages 12.1 fantasy points per game this season. Zach Ertz averages 9.6 with no turnovers. And flipping over the averages, looking at the receiving share, you get Sam Laporta with that 22.7% of the team's total receiving share. So that does make sense that he'd be somewhere between 2nd and 3rd largest receiving share on the team. And then over here with Zach Ertz, you have him at about 16% of the team's total receiving share. So I would say this game looks pretty tough for Washington. The only thing, like I said, they had going for them before was the rushing rank. So they'd really have to utilize that. But there's so many weapons on Detroit. It's so much that they can work on, especially with a pretty bad defense. But the numbers would suggest that this looks like it would be a pretty big blowout for Detroit. So that's all I have for this game today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. And leave a comment on what else you might want to see in the future. Other than that, thank you so much for watching.